All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Office Hours. Thank you for tuning again. If you are tuning in live, if you are watching the recording after the fact, thank you for watching us later. And welcome back. This is a open Q&A style show here. Where we take questions from YouTube chat and from our Office Hours Slack channel about SaberSim, about DFS, and we talk about it and dive deep into some of these questions and get some answers and have some conversations about these kinds of things. So this is a live show for a reason. I have mentioned it before. We are live because we want clarifying questions. We want follow-up questions. We want to really dive deep into some of these topics and really make sure that we're given solid answers that are helpful. And this is a daily show for a reason. This is not a tout show. This is not a pick show. But we like to take a look at the slates we have going on tonight, give practical advice, and use the most recent slates, yesterday's and today's slates most of the time, for helping to walk through some topics. So we've got a few questions already in Slack. We've got some exciting questions today that I'm pretty interested in diving into. But as always, if you have any questions, anything you want to talk through, just pop it into our Office Hours channel on Slack or pop it into YouTube chat, and we will get right into it. So I am going to start here. We have a question from Poker Dad in the Office Hours channel in Slack. Can you explain your process for building MLB lineups on a slate like tonight? We have gotten this question a few times. I think last time we took a look at a question like this, it was on a bit of a smaller MLB slate. Yeah, I would be happy to go through a little bit of this here. I think you're going to see some common trends as we get to doing a few more of these. So let me go ahead and pull up SaberSim here. All right, so we've got it up. So let's talk about a little bit of a bigger slate tonight. Maybe the ways things we're thinking about, how we want to use the tool, or at least how we want to get started with our process, right? So one thing we've kind of hit pretty hard so far when we've been doing these office hour sessions is the importance of a test build to get an idea of where the baselines are for the slate. And I think that's an important thing to look at, but I'm going to start a little bit earlier here today and really emphasize some of the things we can do even before our step or even before building our first build and just get familiar with the slate overall. So one thing I like to do, back to basics, right? It's a 13-game slate. Start thinking about what that means. And a good way to do that is to look at the sliders. On a 13-game slate, we're going to need a little bit less leverage over the field just because there's so many more options. There's going to be a lot of players that are just playing suboptimal plays. The leverage we need over the field is a little bit lower on a night like tonight. So baseball, still a very variant sport. We are still going to have a moderately high ownership fade, but it's going to be a little bit lower than some of those high ownership fades we see on the 6-game slate like we had yesterday, for example. Smart diversity is going to come down just a tad. We are a little bit more willing to rely on some median projections for a slate like this, just because, again, there's a lot of plays here. There's a lot of places where people can just go wrong and pick suboptimal plays. Correlation's still going to be very high. We still want those big stacks. We probably want much bigger stacks actually tonight on a big slate like this, because the potential outcome of a team going off and hitting that absolute ceiling is a lot higher with 26 teams playing ball here. So a few other things worth noting right out of the gate. I like to get an idea of where the perceived hitting spots are going to be on a slate like tonight and where SaberSim's, so where the public's perceived hitting spots are on a slate like tonight and where SaberSim's perceived hitting spots are. So just a quick look around. Again, this is all ahead of a test build, so we're going to get some more insights once we run a test build. But we see the Yankees, Braves, Twins, Angels, all over 5 implied runs by SaberSim. So starting to get an idea of where some hitting opportunities may be. In general, it looks like a slate that is probably pretty pitching focused based on some of the totals we're seeing here. And obviously, there's already been a lot of discussion in the MLB channel about that. We've got a ton of aces on the mound tonight. Just in general, a very strong pitching slate overall. So that kind of correlates with what we're seeing on the run totals here. Another thing I like to do early on, again, just to get an idea, get familiar with the slate, is to look at where Vegas has some of these teams and see just where potential outliers may be. So that process can be a little bit more involved. I'm not going to go super in depth into that right now, but it's pretty easy to pull up maybe one of your preferred books and get an idea. But a few things I noted just in some of my early reviews today is that we are under on the Giants relatively. Vegas has the Giants as another one of those teams that's over 5 runs. And we are very bullish on this game overall as a hitting environment. We are over on the Rangers and we are over on the Angels. Part of which makes this very interesting is that Andrew Heaney, we have him projected well. He's probably the best value pitching play on the slate. Second best, but he is probably going to be very chalky tonight. He is becoming the SP2 of choice on DraftKings, it looks like, around the industry. So a few things I am just looking at so far. I saw Jack Fishman said free the luscious locks in the YouTube chat. Maybe at the end of the show we'll do a special let the hair down moment. But so real quick, that's just kind of what I'm thinking about as I'm my first impressions looking at the slate, right? We've been talking about this for a couple minutes here. Austin said in YouTube chat, did you say under on the Giants? I believe that is true. Yeah, I mean, at least what I'm looking at right now, I'm typically seeing the Giants at around 5-1, 5-2 runs. We've got them at 4-8, so just very slightly under on that implied run total. Again, just things I'm kind of paying attention to or looking at here. But let's go ahead and look at our test build and then just kind of see what we're getting out of this. So we will run a quick build here. Yeah, and also with this stuff, again, it's noon here where I'm at. We're 5 hours before lock. The closer you do this kind of stuff to lock, the better. The lines are going to move quite a bit. So keep an eye out. I wouldn't take anything. This is, again, definitely not intended to be kind of a pick show, but more just thinking about process, right? So we can see how things are starting to shake out. We've got a few of our favorite aces here at the top for pitching. We've got a little bit of Heaney as well. Relatively condensed pitching core with some of the aces at top here. So let me see here. And then let's go ahead and see what our stacks are looking like. So first of all, we've got our similar big stacks up top, a lot of 5-3, a lot of 5-2, a lot of 4-4, 1-4-3 stack. So this all kind of correlates with what we were expecting. I guess backing up a little bit, what we're doing here now in the step 2 is really checking our priors. The thoughts and things we noticed, thinking about the context of the slate in step 1, we're now kind of looking, what does now SaberSim really think when we allow a build to run? So we start looking at some of these stacks. We've got Twins up top, our biggest stack. I think they are likely to be one of the chalkiest stacks of the night. We noticed also that was a stack that both Vegas and SaberSim had highly, so we see that here. Texas, we had picked out, is an interesting leverage spot, right? We've already noted that Heaney's likely to be pretty popular. We are over on the Rangers comparatively to Vegas, so this might be kind of one of those leverage teams. The Angels, same deal, right? A team that we are a little bit higher on Vegas. So we can see as our opinions of this slate are starting to develop, what are we doing, right? We're taking a few shots on this Texas and Angels game, spreading out exposure to stacks from there. Generally, I would say picking out probably every lineup here is either going to have DeGrom or Scherzer. A couple of them are going to have both, so we're paying up for those expensive pitching. Willing to play a little Heaney where we are not fading him to play Rangers stacks. So just getting an idea of the slate. From there, you can do some of the things we have talked about before with adjusting your batting exposure. So if we look at batting, we're relatively spread out to begin with, but always fine to start dropping some of these down if we don't want to be overly exposed, especially to a 9-hole batter. Maybe we drop him down to 20, and we just start bringing some of these down to a little better range. 35 already starts feeling a lot better. Looking at this earlier, another thing I was thinking is we're quite a bit over on the Rangers right now. If the slate were starting soon, one thing I might do is maybe drop this down a little bit and be willing to get 20% of my stacks for the Rangers, but I don't maybe want 40%. Or another way to accomplish this might be to bring us a little bit closer to Vegas here, maybe split the difference. So just things I would be thinking about approaching a slate like tonight. Obviously, again, there's not really a wrong answer here when you're at step 3. A lot of this is about risk tolerance. So if you are a much more player willing to accept some volatility in your lineups, and you want to condense and you want to kind of play a little bit of a tighter pool, maybe what you are doing instead is chopping off some pitchers off the bottom here, tightening up a pitching pool. So let's say we've at least got 2 lineups with every pitcher or something like that. And maybe we're saying, we actually really like the edge we have with the Rangers tonight. And I want 75% of my lineups to be Ranger stacks. And I'm playing a tight pitching pool. I'm playing a ton of Ranger stacks. And I'm a volatile player that I want to play kind of first or last type lineups. And that's the way I'm approaching this slate. So again, all relying on the same pool of 500 viable lineups that fit a contest type like this. So not really so much of a wrong answer here when we're thinking about it, but just what your risk aversion and how spread out you want to be amongst your pool of lineups. So that would be, again, about how I would kind of think about my lineup process for tonight, or at least a starting point there. So I think Poker Dad said he was going to catch the recording of this later, so I assume he's not in the chat. But if anyone has any questions about that, let me know. I'm going to move us on to the next question here. It also came from Poker Dad. Pop this into the channel here. This one is your process for GPP game selection. Another great question, another very important question, something that is glossed over or forgotten about far too often. The very first thing I'm going to do is direct you, like I have directed so many people lately, to our MLB DFS course. It is on our site, not the app, but the actual SaberSim.com site, under this resources section in strategy, under baseball. Andy put together this course, Build a Winning MLB DFS Process. Lesson number 2 is bankroll management and contest selection. There is 22 minutes of information here. This is a great video. I have plugged this over and over again in Slack, in our support email inbox. Andy did a great job with this course, and there's a reason that this is really the first real lesson of this course, because it is crucial. So there's 22 minutes, a lot more detail in there than I can go into here, but I will give a few thoughts about my general process and things that you want to look for when you are looking at the DraftKings lobby. So I will just go ahead and pull it up. And we can talk a little bit about things that you want to look for. So in a various order of importance, a few things you want to look for. So first of all, the sharks, if you will, or the top players. You can see a few of the contests I've already entered for tonight. Cannot play contests $3 and under. I believe they actually can't play $5 and under if the total prize pool is under 25K as well, but I might need to check that. First things first, very important to prioritize contests that are $3 and under when you can. Again, it's a much softer pool in those contests. Those are easier contests to win. The second thing that I would emphasize is what we call the effective entrance in your contest. So not the total number of entries in the contest, but actually the total number of real people that are theoretically building lineups in that contest. So the calculation you would do for that is you take the total entries allowed in the contest and divide it by the maximum entries per person. So in this case, the mini max has about 36,000 entries in it. And if we take 36,000 entries divided by 150, that is only 240. So while this looks like a pretty good contest, and in a lot of ways, the Minimax is a good contest, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it only requires 240 people to max this out. So even though we are under the $3 range here, this is a contest that is going to be maxed out by some sharp players, and a lot of the total pool of lineups here are going to be relatively sharp 150 maxers playing this contest. So you compare that to something like some of the single entry contests you might see. The Daily Dollar has 2,378, but it is a single entry contest. We know that there are 2,378 unique players in this contest. I can guarantee you there are not that many sharp players that have access to this $1 contest. So this is going to be a lot softer. A few other notes here. It is always important when you can to play contests that you can afford to max. Again, there are always going to be maxers in the contests, especially at the lower stakes. So if you can only, because of your bankroll, play a handful of lineups in a contest, it may be that you are better off applying your bankroll to a contest that you can instead max. So just keep in mind, if you're deciding between $5 in the mini max or maxing out the quarter jukebox, I would recommend in general trying to play something that you can max. And that's just because there are always going to be those people maxing the contest. The people that max the contest are typically the best players in that contest, and they have an increased advantage over you when they can play more lineups. So the last thing I will note here, and then we'll move on, and again, there's more details in that video, is to just take a look at the contest structure itself. So you may see some of these notes I've got on my DraftKings lobby. This is actually from a Roto Grinders extension that's pretty useful and is free. I've got it on Firefox here. They have it for Chrome too. And if we click into one of these contests, it gives you some useful information here about the contest. So it will give you the margin or the rake. It will tell you how many people are paid out, what the min cash line is, what percentage is to first, what percentage is to the top 10. So we had talked last week, a few of the signals I'm looking for when I look at this kind of thing is I want a contest that in general pays 20% or less to first. 10% is even better. I want a contest that in general is 40% or less to the top 10. Again, lower is quite a bit better. And I want a contest that in general, where I can find it, pays 2x min cash. Those are just the signals I use to determine if a contest is structured well that I'm looking at. This isn't the perfect contest, but it does a lot of things right. And you'll find that in general, the single entry and 3 entry max contests just have a lot better structure, just have a lot better stats here when you're looking at it. So a few things, right? Effective entrance, play under $3 when you can, play contests you can afford to max, and play contests that are structured well. Those are kind of my 4 signals that I'm in general looking at. And I would recommend checking out that video, that lesson in the course, because it goes into quite a bit more detail. So there are also some notes about bankroll management and things like that there that haven't really dived into here. But yeah, I would check that out. All right, cool. Let's see. So we have another question here from Slack. All right. This question is from Phantom5251 in our Slack channel. I would be curious to learn more about how SaberSim handles cores. Other sites often like to tout/post their core plays, and was curious how/if this should be applied with SaberSim. I know Max and Andy did a video during football season about the right or wrong way to handle cores for NFL, but was just curious about applying it to MLB, NBA, or other sports. Is it a matter of running a test build to see who SS is on and then giving those plays a higher min exposure? Maybe it's not even necessary/recommended, but was just curious. Thanks. And also mentioned that probably going to be watching the recording of this later. So yeah, you are very much on the right track there, Phantom. I would definitely say the best way to think about core plays, we have a test build here. Let's come back to this. reset our exposures. Yeah, right. So the best way to start getting an idea of the core plays for SaberSim on a given slate is to run the test build and see what you are getting out. We recently pushed a change to our ownership fade calculation that prioritizes fading ownership more on players that are more variant. So we are going to, in general, again, very much so in general, create core plays and probably create higher exposure to plays in general for players that are a little less variant. So you may still see high exposures for baseball. But in general, I think the best way of thinking about cores is going to be on your pitchers. From there, I would say thinking about core plays is more about a risk tolerance side of things than anything else, right? When we are taking into account a high smart diversity, moderate ownership fade slider, whatever the default sliders are for a given contest, we're going to bring up lineups and exposures that are properly leveraged against the field to the extent that we think is appropriate, right? So let's say these ownership numbers were exact and we just knew that these were what these were going to be. By running a default build here, we feel that being twice the field on Scherzer provides enough leverage, relative edge against the field that we need. And similarly for DeGrom, right? We're about twice as exposed as the field to DeGrom, and we feel that gives us enough relative edge on the field. Same thing with Heaney. Now, if you wanted to take more of a core approach to your lineup building process, what you are really saying is that you want to build around one player or a set of player, and then when and if that player has a good night, give yourself more opportunities to win the contest, right? You have more lineups that have that player in it. So yes, the way I would start is if that was your approach that you wanted to take, is I would say explore what it looks like locking in someone like your highest owned pitcher on the slate, right? And all of a sudden you're going to see everything kind of readjust, float around here, and go from there, right? So now we've kind of established DeGrom as a lock, and we haven't gone far off what SaberSim was recommending to begin with, right? We didn't take a play that was projected really low and wasn't showing up in any lineups and hit the lock button on him. We took a player that we were already getting some of, and we locked him in. And we know now we've got a more volatile lineup portfolio here. We're going to have 100% DeGrom. I know, for example, there's some concerns about his pitch count tonight, coming back from injury. So if he only pitches 5 innings, 6 innings, something like that, we're probably going to have 20 lineups go down with the ship. But that's okay, because if he throws 8 innings and has 15 strikeouts, we have 20 different lineups to take advantage of that. So that's kind of the thinking with core plays there. That's the way I would start with this is run your test build, get familiar with the plays that SaberSim already likes. Those are the kind of plays that we would call our cores. And then explore what happens when you bump the minimum exposure up to your lineups, and recognize what statement you are making about the outcome of the slate with those lineups, right? You could even get more defined and do something like this, and then say this. Right? I'm playing DeGrom and Heaney in every single lineup. We're still giving you 20 lineups out of a pool of 500 that we felt were viable to begin with, right? You haven't gotten to the point here where if you got a message here that said you need to build more lineups, right? That might be an indication that this is perhaps a little bit too aggressive of a stance. Maybe not. Maybe you can let it build another 100 lineups or so, and then you're good to go. But you could even do something like this, right? This is just even a more aggressive stance on the slate, and you're going to see it's going to allow you to get a lot of different exposures to different teams because you're already tightening up your exposure at your pitchers. So just recognize what statement about the slate you're making and what statement about your risk tolerance you are making. In general, last note on this before I move us along, the reason that we're not going to have a tout article about core plays or players that are predicted to just do well that night is because that's just not the way that we think about these contests, these players, DFS, right? We are doing this all on a 20 max contest with an entry limit of 10,000 to 50,000 entries, and we're playing baseball and we're on DraftKings, and everything about what came out in this build is related to that, right? We're going to get a slightly different result if we're playing a small single entry contest, right? Ownership fade's going to drop a lot lower. Your smart diversity is going to drop a lot lower. If we're playing a huge contest, we're going to get slightly different lineups. I'm actually going to run this here for a minute. This will only take a couple seconds, but I think it will be useful to demonstrate, right? We're not in the business of touting or locking in DeGrom as our core pitcher. Even if we project him well and he shows up in a lot of lineups, because it is so dependent on the contest type. It is dependent on the entry limit of the contest. It's dependent on the number of players in your contests. It is dependent on all of these things that we basically take as inputs here. So let's just take a look here, see how this shakes out. So remember, on our 20 entry max, we were essentially twice over the field on DeGrom, Scherzer, and Heaney, and we explored options of locking those guys in as core plays. And let's just see instead what it would look like on a 150 max. So I think we picked 150 max and 50K plus here, which I don't know if DraftKings actually has a contest that big tonight, but they do that $5 knuckleball a couple weeks ago was like that. So let's take a look. So let's look at our pitchers now, right? So we still like DeGrom. We don't like him as much, but we still like him quite a bit. Suddenly we are now matching the field on Scherzer. And we are just slightly over the field on Heaney. Someone that now is starting to pop up is Kevin Gossman. Rich Hill's starting to show up in a percentage of our lineups, right? So again, there's certainly nothing wrong with doing this. And saying that that's kind of the way we're thinking, even in 150 lineups, that we want to lock into DeGrom. But our builder has adjusted to the context of the lineup you're playing and basically now made the statement that, you know what, for a contest of this size, even with the field on Scherzer is fine. We want some more exposure to some of these lower owned plays. So is Scherzer a core play for SaberSim? That's kind of what I'm getting at here. So hopefully that discussion was helpful about the best way to think about core plays. I think kind of in summary here, big ideas is if you're going to use a core play type model and you're going to lock in or be well over the field on a certain few players, pick the opportunities where the variance of those players is lower, right? So in a sport like baseball, your variance on your pitchers is a little bit lower. That's probably your best bet to kind of lock in plays and things like that. Secondly, be aware of the contest you're playing, the contest mix, and adjust accordingly, right? If you're playing a 3-entry max and SaberSim is already recommending you are twice the field on DeGrom, so you want to lock him in, that's really just creating one extra entry that you're playing DeGrom in. On a 150 max, it's a lot of lineups we're talking about. We're talking about making a jump of 60 additional lineups on DeGrom. And ask yourself, maybe, are you okay just being 2x the field? And then I guess third would be that effectively the core plays that SaberSim likes for a given contest, for a given slate, are going to be the most exposed players that you are seeing when you run a test build. So I would work from there. I would not go in without having run a test build first and seen what you're getting and just start locking players in pre-build to establish cores or anything like that. I would start with the fundamentals, with the foundation that SaberSim is giving you. So, all right. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, Phantom, if you watch this later, just let me know if you have any questions. We can talk about this again a little bit more in tomorrow's show or a little back and forth in the Slack channel, whatever makes sense. But that's kind of the way we think about cores. We do, one last note here, since I see we have one extra question here. We'll get to that in a minute, but since we have a little bit of extra time here, I've mentioned it before, we are planning on starting to do a little bit more content surrounding looking at our projections, running some test builds for you guys and just kind of talking about what SaberSim is thinking about for the slate. That might help to start thinking about maybe what your core plays might be. So we're hoping to start having that out here in the next month or so. We'll be talking a little bit too about what things are already factored into the model. I know we get that question a lot. What maybe plays we're looking at, maybe certain reasons to be concerned or less confident about certain plays. I mentioned DeGrom's coming back from injury, maybe potentially a pitch count there. Haven't heard anything like that kind of thing. So keep an eye out for that. All right, cool. So we do have another question in here from Slack. Let's see here. This one came in from Be More BZ in Slack. Can we stick to the same strategy on a 3-game NBA slate like the 2-gamer? I assume this is partially in reference to our conversation we had yesterday about how we might attack a 2-game slate in NBA. So we had talked about yesterday, kind of just backing up here a little bit, some things you could potentially do from the lens of trying to differentiate. We had talked about pulling down the max salary a bit to either 100 less or 500 less, or even for massive contests, very big stuff, 1,000 less, right? We had talked about dropping our min projection down a little bit, maybe to something like 12. And we were looking at some of the lower owned projected players on the slate and just kind of getting an idea of what kind of players were down here and setting something reasonable that made sense. So let's see, we can always look at our detailed player projections. Again, this isn't necessarily something you'd want to do just blindly, but it's always something that you can look at when you are trying to get different. I think the main thing we were thinking about yesterday is we had identified a couple plays down at the bottom of the projections where there was some opportunity. And I haven't had a chance to dive in as deep here tonight on the NBA slate. But last night we had identified Dwayne Dedman as one big fantasy points per minute guy. And he actually ended up being optimal in a lot of lineups last night because he did get that run and he was projected at like 12. So we dropped our min projection down to 12. He would have been able to show up in some lineups if you had dropped it down there. Claxton is again, I'm not touting these plays. That's not the point of this. I'm just trying to show you a way of maybe differentiating your lineups. But that's another player that does have a high fantasy point per minute. Maybe a reason you might want to drop your min projection down to 13 or something like that to at least get access to that player. But the broader question here, should we stick or can we stick to the same strategy on a 3-game NBA slate like the 2-gamer? You certainly can. There's less need to, first of all, I would say, in terms of differentiating to that extent. When we were looking last night, having a min projection at 15 was dropping off almost a quarter of the players with a projection in the pool at all. Tonight, it shouldn't be as extreme since we have 3 games on the slate. Also, just a handful more or an extra game here is going to reduce your chance of duplication just a little bit. But I would still look at dropping your max salary down a little bit. Maybe if you did 500 last night, maybe you just do 100 tonight. Give yourself a chance to be duplicated a little less. And as you are doing your research, let me qualify it that way. You can still explore the option of potentially dropping min projection down if you want to get a couple of the lower owned plays in your pool. If you do that, let's just go ahead and do that here, for example, real quick. So let's build 20. Let's use a 100 salary and let's use min projection down. We can always quality control this back down a little bit too. So that's the way we like to think about step 3. We've allowed some of those lower projected plays into our pool, but we don't want to go crazy on them. So maybe let's see how much we get. All right, cool. So let's just see if we got. So we did get some access to some of these lower projected plays. There's a couple things you could do here to lower your overall risk. I mean, we have quite a few here. So we have really 2, 3, 4, 7. We have 10 lineups of our 20 that have at least one of these super low owned plays. So obviously, again, a few different ways you could think about this here, but maybe we cut off some of these players. Reggie Jackson has a very low value, under 4. So maybe we chop him off and overall just limit our exposure to some of these low-owned plays. Maybe we just really want to take a shot on 10% Claxton, maybe 10% Beverly, big steals guy, something like that. So I would say just broad strokes here, right? We're a little less concerned about being duplicated on a slate like this, but I would still give yourself some routes to avoid duplication by maybe letting a few lower owned plays in your pool, potentially, carefully, of course, not letting them disrupt your entire lineup build, and then also still capping maybe your max salary at something like 100 less just to avoid that duplication on the high end on that salary band. Yeah, again, I have spent a little bit more time on baseball so far in my research this morning. I haven't had a chance to really break heavily into the basketball slate for tonight's slate. One thing I would also start exploring on a 3-game slate here too is on a 2-game slate like yesterday, you're going to see subtle differences in some of that stud ownership here and there. I think Lillard came in a little bit lower owned than some of those other guys. And then he, of course, proceeded to hit like 10 threes or whatever and ended up optimal. But on a 3-game slate, we really start to see some of that breakout where you can get ownership at a premium on some of these guys. So as the day goes on, keep an eye on what ownership numbers are looking like. And especially in the high end, I would just be aware of ownership on some of these guys, right? Guys like Tatum too, there's, I think, a little bit of a perception after one game in the NBA, for whatever reason, people really get overexcited. And Nets take game 1. They did it in a pretty clear fashion. I wouldn't be surprised if Tatum's ownership is pretty low. So guys that have relatively similar ceilings, right? You see Tatum, Durant's another guy that we have relatively low on. Just keep an eye on that throughout the day. The builder should prioritize some of those plays too. Like you should see that you're probably already over the field on some of those guys, depending on what your ownership fade looks like. Let's take a look at this. So we're even with the field on Tatum, slightly under on Durant. That's fine. I mean, it might be something that you look at bumping these up a little bit. Maybe you want to be a little bit higher owned on Tatum or someone like that, or you want to be double the field on someone like Durant. Things I would just think about, right? They have similar ceilings as some of these other high guys. They're going to have slightly lower median projections, which is going to deflate their ownership, but you're shooting for the ceiling in the GPP. So another thing I would just think about. And maybe you don't need to do both of these things at once, right? Maybe you come back and you start Xing out some of these lower owned players on the slate or lower projected players that we had put in here. And you could do this again. It would probably be faster with just another fresh build where that min projection was set a little higher. But maybe your way of getting edge on the field tonight is taking shots on some of these lower owned ceiling players. And it's probably a better way to go, to be honest. And crossing off some of the just in general poor plays, low value guys on the slate instead. So a lot of ways to go. 3 games, big difference in 2 games. Some new strategies start opening up, but always a big focus on avoiding duplication, differentiating from the field, taking advantage of some of those lower owned plays. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions there. All right. Let's see. Only a handful of questions so far today, but all really good ones, all ones where there was a lot of things to talk about and dive a little bit deeper. While we have a little bit of a pause here, are there any other questions from anyone else? Anything folks want to talk about at all? It's a good time to ask. Nothing. All quiet so far. One thing I will also plug while we are here, have a couple minutes, is we will be doing a sports betting strategy session on Thursday during this time slot. I think it actually may start a bit earlier than office hours. I will check on that and confirm. We will obviously make sure that everyone knows what time things are starting in Slack, and I think we've got an email plan to go out for that too. So we'll have Andy and Max on Thursday in this time slot, along with yours truly talking a little bit sports betting. We've had some requests on a deep dive for that topic. I had mentioned that we want to, in general, going forward each week, use that Thursday time slot to do a little bit of a deeper strategy dive. So stay tuned for that. The first one will probably be starting here this week. So, all right. I am not seeing any other questions come in here. Those were some great questions today. Those ones are always really fun. Obviously, the questions about how to do certain things with the tool and more kind of instructional questions can be super useful in this time slot to walk through and show live and demo. But I think those strategy ones are especially fun to really dive right into. So great questions. I am going to go ahead and probably leave it off there. Still nothing has come in. We'll do it the same way as we did yesterday. There's another 15 minutes or so in the office hour here. So if you have another question or something pops into your head as soon as we go off, just pop it into the channel in Slack. I will be around for another 15 or 20 minutes to answer any questions that come in Slack in that time frame. Otherwise, feel free to pop any questions you have at all through the evening and tomorrow morning into that channel. We will make sure we get to it in tomorrow's show. I will get this recording up onto YouTube this afternoon with timestamps. Hopefully that's been helpful. It seems like we've had a pretty consistent audience watching on YouTube recordings later. So thank you for all of you that may be watching this as a recording. And we will be back again live tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. So this has been fun so far. Again, if there's any feedback, anything that we can do to make this more useful for you guys, I've enjoyed doing it. This is for you guys. So whether you watch the recording, whether you watch it live, any feedback is appreciated. We've still got some exciting things planned here. So look forward to chatting again tomorrow, and good luck in all of your contests tonight. All right. Thank you.